Welcome to the Storytime Adventures for Adults video series. Today we'll be reading Part 1, 1730, pages 77 to 82 from Songs from the Depths by Meg Swanson. By the following week, Constance had just about driven herself out of her mind, trying to find out more about this musician. She hadn't learned anything new about the musician directly, but because of her encounter with Sarah and the missing pin, she started to take note of other missing things. No, Constance thought, not just things. Skills, memories, all gone. Not only had the people in town forgotten these details, but also they had gone on living their lives as though nothing were lost. Taken, Constance corrected herself, not forgotten. A person can't forget how to shear a sheep, or how to tell when their tomatoes are ready to pick. Yet there it was. People had lost their livelihoods because they suddenly believed they never performed those tasks before. Constance sat down at her loom and set her mug of steaming tea on the window ledge. She had just started the rhythmic movements of moving the right and left across the warp of the loom when she felt it. Lifting her head and brushing strands of hair out of her face, she sat back. Music. I'm feeling music. How does a person feel music? Constance turned her head and looked out the window to the town square, where she could see that a crowd had gathered. There in the center was the mysterious musician. She was standing on the raised stone edge of the fountain in the center of the square. Constance was taken aback. Even if she hadn't been balanced on the ledge, the musician still would have towered over the crowd. Constance struggled to see more, but her store was set back from the square, and she couldn't take in the scene the way she wanted to. Eventually, Constance tried to go back to her weaving. This was insanity. There had been traveling performers of all kinds during her time of living here in town, and she had never before heard them from her store. She furrowed her brow and looked closely at her work. Damn it. Constance threw the weft down on the fabric stretched in front of her. Back several rows she had made an error, and now she would have to tear it all back out. She stood from the loom, hands on her hips. She couldn't concentrate because of the music. Walking slowly to the door, she watched as a few people had started to drift away from the town square. They appeared to be in the foggy state as Sarah had been the week prior, but they had vague smiles on their faces, and they were all saying the same word. No, not a word, a name. Agatha. Constance rubbed her arms as a sudden chill ran over her. She continued to move forward, conscious of every step she took. When she reached the edge of the town square, she locked her eyes with the woman commanding her audience, and found herself fighting back blackness. Constance stopped, thinking she was about to faint. She turned and went back to her shop, and for the first time since she first opened her shop, she closed early. Constance worked behind closed doors for the next several days. Her movements felt sluggish and painful. Twice she threaded her loom incorrectly, and more times than that she had to tear out entire projects. Things as simple as placemats came off the warp, a knotted mess, and still Constance forced herself to work. This is how she made her living. If she couldn't finish these orders, she would starve. She was cursing herself over a shawl when the door opened. I'm not open to customers today, sorry, Constance said, not even looking up. I'm not a customer. I'm here to learn. Constance looked up and clenched her fists. Haven't you learned enough? Not yet. You left before I could finish my song. The woman gave Constance a tight-lipped smile. Are you having problems with your hands? Constance unclenched her hands and forced them to relax. No, I'm fine. Now, if you excuse me, I need to concentrate. But I've written a song for you. I've been watching you since I arrived in the square, you know. You ignored me when I was calling for you. I want to know how you did it. And I would love to finish learning how to weave and... The musician twisted her face into an expression that resembled thinking. Knit. That's it. That's the other skill that's in there. Calling me? What are you talking about? The woman waved a slender hand dismissively. Called you, sang to you, whichever. I know you heard me. You almost came to the square. What stopped you? Constance stood and crossed her arms. Though the woman in her shop still loomed over her, Constance felt more on an even footing with her. You stopped me. I could see your eyes from the edge of the crowd, and I saw them turn to stone. Whatever you are, Whatever you are doing, you are hurting these people, my people. You won't get me." The other woman nodded and shrugged. "All right. Obviously, you're just too strong for me. Before I go, though, might I sit and watch you finish your work?" "I'd rather you didn't." "I'll just take my leave, then." Constance watched as the woman picked up her lute, glided outside, and headed toward the town square. Constance firmly shut the door and locked it before she bent back over the shawl and began to work. Unbidden, the words of the song drifted into Constance's shop. The tune was catchy, and Constance found herself moving the weft in time with the song. Constance squinted. "No, she isn't going to win. This is my life, and I'm going to keep it." The song grew louder, and Constance looked out the window. There in the town square was the musician, strumming her lute and aiming her piercing gaze right at Constance's shop. How was it possible that Constance could hear the song so clearly? It's not possible. She shook her head and leaned over the loom. Before she finished an inch, the weft clattered to the floor, and Constance gritted her teeth at the song that was playing over and over in her head. It got louder the more Constance tried to work through it. Left, right, tighten. Left, right, tighten. The weaver wefts across her warp, images of sea and fields of green. She brings to life with yarn. She works as fate, controlling the yarns of life. Left, right, tighten. Left, right, tighten. In the days that followed, Constance continued to try to fight through the music. People stopped coming into her shop and often avoided her side of the street altogether because of the shouts of frustration and crashing of shells. When she could take no more, Constance threw her head back, let out one short scream, and let the darkness take her. Hours later, the townspeople heard the shrieks and came running to the weaver's shop. It took 3 men to restrain Constance. When they finally got her still, the doctor was able to sedate her and examine her injuries. All her injuries were self-inflicted. Long scratches down her face and splinters of wood in her hands from the chair that was smashed to pieces. The people in the town couldn't fathom what happened, but whispers started that it was because she was unmarried. "Unmarried women of a certain age just lose control of their faculties," Sarah told her husband while shaking her head sadly. "I saw it coming the last time I visited her. She asked me, quite cruelly, about a shawl pin that we never could have afforded." Everyone was so distracted by Constance's breakdown that no one noticed the musician, wrapped in a flying wool cloak, which was secured with a fleur-de-lis pin, leave town without a backward glance. This was Part 1, 1730, pages 77 to 82 from Songs from the Desk by Meg Swanson. We will conclude Part 1 on September 2nd. If you can't wait until then to hear how the story goes, feel free to purchase the book at www.megswanson.me. If you'd like to contribute to these series, please feel free to become a patron on Patreon. Details for joining are on my website, www.reneeannhughes.com. And also please subscribe to this YouTube channel so you won't miss any new videos. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.